Are you there? Good. Okay. Chapter 5 is what we're starting on now. Give me a page number. 94 is where we are in your textbook. I'm recording here so that I can play this for my 7th period class. And I'm going to stay here at the computer because their main complaint the last time I did this was I was pointing at things to you all, but they couldn't see where I was. So I'm going to use this lovely cursor to point at things today. Okay? I'm going to go to this slide here first, which is not in this chapter. You may remember this back from chapter 1. Okay? This is basically showing you the progression that we've done over the last 2 months. Okay? We started, way up here, we started giving you a general overview of the body, right? The different areas and the planes and the directions, right? Then we started talking about chemistry, right? Atoms and molecules. Then we went to cells, right? Organelles and how the different cells themselves work. And now this chapter is the last of the preparation chapters until we get into the systems. And that's on tissues. Okay? And I agree. This is my least favorite part of the year, but it needs to be done. You have to have the background before we jump into the systems. Okay? So back to this picture. This is Henrietta Lacks. It's the little story that's in the front of chapter 5. A fascinating story. This young lady from Baltimore, grew up not too far from where we are here right now, had uterine cancer. I was taken to Johns Hopkins. This was 40 plus years ago, I think. And in the course of their diagnosing her, they took a sample from her tissue, right, from her uterus. And the cells that they took were just amazingly quick growing. Unbeknownst to her, those cells became the basis for almost every single other cell that's used in laboratories today. She didn't even know this, but these cancer cells grew so rapidly and divided so nicely that basically whenever they want to test certain things, they used her cells.
Could they clone her today?
Theoretically, these are easily the most studied cells in the entire world are her cells. But her family just found out about this maybe 5-6 years ago. Yeah. And it happened a long time ago. It was a fantastic book called The Immortal Life of Henrietta Lacks. I highly recommend it. Very nicely done. Good read. They give you a little bit of detail here in this chapter. But the point is these tissues, these cells, how they work together to form these tissues. 4 different types that we're going to deal with in this chapter. Epithelial, connective, muscle tissue, and nervous tissue. The last 2 you're pretty comfortable with, right? What a muscle is, how that works, the movement it performs, right? That's its main function. The nervous tissue, of course, that's what transmits the impulses, right? And if you look on your study guide, which I just handed out to this class in 7th period, you should have this as well by now, you can see that you need to know, down at the very bottom, the table on page 95 is what I'm showing you right here. You need to know their functions, not their locations or distinguishing characteristics, just the functions of these 4 main types of tissue. And then we're going to learn about all the specific types of these kinds of tissues. Okay? The 2 you're probably not that familiar with are epithelial and connective. Epithelial tissue, this is what covers your body surfaces. It lines the internal organs. It makes up the glands of our bodies. The connective tissue is all the stuff that's kind of in between, kind of pulls everything else together. What you will see when we dissect our cats is that there is oodles of connective tissue. It's everywhere. And we have to continually get rid of it as we're dissecting to get to the good stuff. The organs and the nerves and the muscles and those things. Okay? So again, you don't have to know these 2 pieces here, but you definitely want to know functions of them. So let's jump right in. If you want to follow along on your study guide, I have listed the page numbers of these different tissues. And basically how your test is going to work is this. There will be some questions on these functions that we just talked about, as well as a couple other pieces that are down there on the bottom. You have to also know each of these tissues as far as where are they. And every picture, like if you look over here on page 96, when the first one we're talking about here is simple squamous epithelium, every picture, they tell you where it's located, right? They show you where it's at. So you'll need to know that for each of these tissue samples, right? It's on the very top of the study guide. It says that you need to be able to tell what their location or function is. Are you with me? And the rest of the test will be literally these slides that are going to be up there, and you'll have to identify them. We have some microscope slides of these same tissues that we're going to compare, not in the test, but here with us together, okay? Looking for similarities, because again, these are just one picture. If you Googled simple squamous epithelium, you'd find other pictures, okay? But this is the beginning of that process. So let's run through a few of these here. So we're starting off with the epithelial tissues. This is simple squamous epithelium. Where does it say it's located at? In the lungs, and particularly where in the lungs? If you want to, as again, we're on page 96 here. The lining of the air sacs. We call them alveoli. Yes. So this is the actual structure that brings the oxygen into the cell and takes the carbon dioxide out of the cell, right? Main function of the lungs. So you only want this very thin layer of cells, and that's what these squamous means. What does squamous mean? If you look in the very beginning of your chapter here, there's a little root directory that's on the very, I think, top of the opposite page from where Henrietta Locke's is there. A flat or scale-like. So squamous means like a scale, which is kind of what that looks like, right? So simple squamous epithelium. Do you have to know all three words, Daniel? You do, all three of them. Simple means one layer. Squamous is describing the shape. Epithelium is the type of tissue. Cool? I wasn't picking on you, Daniel. I just turned over and saw you there. All right? Next one is simple cuboidal epithelium. So simple again means what, friends? One layer. Cuboidal means what? Yeah, it's shaped like a cube, right? Like a square. And then epithelium, again, being the type of the four types, the main types of tissue. This is epithelial tissue we're dealing with. So simple cuboidal epithelium. Where is this guy located? Sure, you look at the picture and you say kidneys, definitely. Does it tell you where in the kidneys in your book here? Kidney tubules. Does anyone remember what the kidneys do? Like their main purpose? Filter, right? They filter our blood. Okay? So these are those tubes that are actually doing that filtering in those tubules of the kidney. By the way, as we go through here, you'll see the different pieces of the cells. They're telling you about them. Each of these cells will have a nucleus.
We have to label them?
You would not. You just have to do identify. Okay? Each of them has this basement membrane, which is basically the separation between the actual epithelium and the connective tissue below it. None of these tissues ever occur like by themselves. They're always with other tissues. Because remember, connective tissue is one of our four here. No, yeah, it's all intermeshed together. Yeah. All right, let's move to the next one. Simple columnar epithelium. So simple means what? One layer. Okay, and you can see these nuclei are kind of lined up all real nice. A little tricky once in a while. They kind of don't. They almost look like they're multiple layers, but just one layer there. Columnar means what? Like a rectangle, a column, right? Yeah, exactly. Simple columnar epithelium. Two things. Let's see if I can do this here. Two things to show you in particular with these guys. The first is this goblet cell. A goblet cell. Goblet like, like a wine glass goblet, right? The goblet cells hold mucus. They're actually what produce the mucus. And mucus, we tend to think of, a nasty, snotty nose when you have a cold. But mucus is all throughout your body doing lots of different things. We just tend to call mucus this stuff comes out of our nose. But this is talking about inside the digestive tract, lots of mucus there. Inside your respiratory tract, lots of mucus. Inside the urinary tract, up through the urethras and the penis and the vagina, there is mucus that's present there. Okay? It's good stuff. So goblet cells produce mucus. The second piece I wanted to point out to you is this here, the microvilli. Can you see? It's tough to follow it, but the edge of these cells are kind of like this little kind of up and down pattern, right? I don't know if you can see that if you look real close. Sorry, this is from the small intestine, if you look here. Right, this would be the outermost layer that lines the inside of that, of the small intestine. Okay? So it has kind of this rough pattern to it. And I'm a terrible drawer, so I apologize for that. But what this does, friends, are you comfortable if I took this and I stretched it out straight, it would be this big, huge, long thing, right? It increases the surface area. What's the main function of the small intestine? Do you remember? Maybe we never talked about this. Sorry? I heard a couple of different things. Digestion, sure, of course. So digestion means breaking down, right? So that's really not much the work of the small intestine. That's much more, well, okay, it is some. The stomach as well as the small intestine. But it's also absorption. It's where your body absorbs nutrients. So therefore, this length of small intestine is something on the order of 30 feet long, all coiled up inside of you. But even in that 30 feet, if you add this microvilli, can you see you have so much more surface area for you to absorb? So therefore, as your food moves through that tube, it continues to absorb the nutrients that it needs. The stuff you don't need, you pass into the large intestine. All the water gets drawn out of it in the large intestine. That's its main job, is to remove the water and break down some more of the fats. And then you expel it out as your feces. So the microvilli, it increases the surface area so that you can do more absorption in these tissues. Yes, ma'am?
So this is like if you were to, if you had like an intestine and you were to cut it frontal,
Yeah. So this is basically the outermost layer. And
but if it,
let's see if I can draw you something up here. No, I'm sorry, the innermost. So you have this big tube. Let's say I took the small intestine and I cut it into its tube, right? There's going to be a lot of different layers here that make it up. This innermost layer, that would be this simple columnar epithelium.
so like the ratio of like the part where like this things like pass through,
Mm-hmm.
like a lot. It's like small to like a lot of like because the space where this
This looks very small right here, you're saying.
compared to the rest.
Yes. No, it's much larger than it looks. It's just the way that they've put this slide together. Right, exactly. And the same way I drew it very poorly here as well. Okay? Going to ignore the phone here. Okay. Let's go to the next one. Shh. I've got time for maybe two more here, friends. Pseudostratified columnar epithelium. This is on page 98 now. Shh, 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 shh. So, stratified. Remember, so far we've been talking about simple has been always the first term. And what you'll see in some of these next ones, I'm skipping over one, that you get stratified. So really we have these two different categories. Either it's simple, meaning one layer, or stratified, meaning multiple layers put together. Pseudo-stratified, does anybody know what pseudo means? No, not somewhat. Not similar.
Can I read up on the book? Outside.
Sure.
Tissue with cells that appear to be in layers.
So they appear to be in layers, but they actually aren't. Pseudo means false.
Yeah, like a pseudonym.
Yeah, right. Pseudo means, so to be pseudo-stratified means, ooh, I look at this and I think it looks like it's stratified, like it's multiple layers, but it's actually not. It's just one layer of tissue. And you see the nuclei don't follow this nice, crisp, clean pattern like, like this guy does, right? They're all pretty well lined up here. The pseudo-stratified, they're kind of up and then down and up and down. And so it looks like it's stratified, but it actually isn't. It's still just one layer. Okay? Pseudostratified also has these goblet cells. Goblet cells produce what? Mucus. Good. This is a test question, right? Goblet cells produce mucus. They also have this stuff on top called cilia. Cilia, which would be these guys, right? Oh boy, terrible arrow.
Are the cilia attached to the cells of the tissue?
They are attached to the actual cells that make up the tissue. Yes. So what these guys, you can see from the picture here that it's in the lungs is where we see these. The cilia acts like a wave to move the mucus up from the lungs and out when you are sick and you're coughing and hacking this lovely yellow and green stuff, right? It's tasty. The point of that, friends, you guys got thin stomachs. The point of that is you've got gunk in your lungs, you've got infections in your lungs or things are there, and your body's trying to remove, to get that stuff out. And the cilia is what does that. It beats like a wave to move that mucus up and out. Does that make sense?
Yes.
Okay. So the goblet cells will produce mucus that will cover this cilia, and it can move it either down or it can move it up. Okay? I'm going to stop us there so this can compile.